Views expressed on this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and are not necessarily those of this station, its management, or other advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.
This show's audio was via a Skype call.
When you add Be You plus Live Your Purpose, what do you get? Joy. That's the motto of Unstuck JOY with Vicki Todd. Vicki believes you were born with gifts that you're meant to use to make the world a brighter place. Have you ever wondered, is this all life has to offer? There must be more. If you answer yes, then Unstuck JOY is the show for you. Each show will feature a memoir artwork painted by Vicki that taps into universal themes of evolution, hope, inner strength, and self-growth. Vicki will also ask listeners to play along. Draw, doodle, collage, write, and or paint your way to soul clarity with Art Vision Journaling. Unstuck JOY will compel you to tune into your soul's whispers to realize your unique dreams. Get ready to get unstuck.
Hey everybody, welcome to Unstuck JOY, the art of living on purpose. I'm your host, Vicki Todd, and we come to you each first and third Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, and this is the place where we give you tips and an art vision journal prompt that you can do at home to evolve ever closer to your true self and live unstuck joy. So I'm so excited for today's conversation. It's going to be so wonderful. My guest is Laurie McCammon, and she has written this beautiful, beautiful book, Enough: How to Liberate Yourself and Remake the World with Just One Word. And so it's all about moving away from the old story of fear and scarcity and competition and moving into the beautiful new story of love and abundance and community. And she also recently came out with this juicy, big, chock full companion guide that has a ton of individual exercises as well as group exercises that you can do in a circle. And so I met Laurie last February, right? February 2017 at the Women of Wisdom Conference in Seattle. And it was a gorgeous day-long workshop about the Enough book and about the Enough concept. And so welcome, Laurie. I'm so happy that you're here.
Oh, I'm so excited to see you again, Vicki.
I know. This is awesome. Well, I have to tell you that since I met you in person and we had the full day experience just a few months ago, and you have such a loving and nurturing energy. And I have to say that every page and every word of your Enough book, I could feel that nurturing energy coming out. And so it really is a beautiful, beautiful book, and it really resonated with me. So thank you for writing it.
Oh, thank you.
Well, before we get to the first question, I want to let everyone know what I'm doing with the Art Vision prompt today. And so it is called I Am Enough, to go along with Laurie's Enough message. And so this is one that I've already done. I did a collage. I found these really cool lips that look like they're just whispering out, I am enough. And so I kind of did a word map of some of the concepts from Laurie's book about the Enough story, like flow, inspiration, transform, beingness, female energy, joy, sovereign. And so if you would like to do your own, because this is really fun to do, go to my website, VickiWorldArt.com. There's art visioning in the menu. Underneath that is art vision prompts. And this one is called I Am Enough. And so today I'm going to do one of the exercises from her Enough workbook that is going to be a collage about my own Enough story. So we'll check that out toward the end of the show. So awesome. Okay, so Laurie, tell us about what is this Enough message? What is it all about?
Well, we find that enough comes up in a lot of places these days, and I am enough seems like more like a self-help message. But the approach that I took it was into what I call a deep dive. That this concept of being enough, having enough, is really, it's a reframe. It's a total reframe of the kind of story that we're used to. This idea that we're not good enough, that we haven't done enough, and that there isn't enough to go around. So, so it's a reframe into the enoughness that we were born to be, the enoughness that we've always been and could never not be. And it invites us back into the more universal story of nature's big enough story. That's really what's behind all of the evolution that's ever taken place in the universe. It's all really about how enough can be created and shared by everybody.
Okay, because in the book you talk about the two stories, the not enough story and the enough story. So just so everybody's on the same page, what is the difference between the not enough and where did it come from? Where are we with that versus this new fabulous enough message?
Right. Well, the enough story actually came to me as what I call a divine download. And it came through the heart. It came as this just pronouncements that I could feel in every part of my body, vibrating really high. And it made me really think about how we live. And it really made me think about how we tend to go along with this idea that there's scarcity and that we're not enough. And so that brought me on this journey of researching, where did this story come from? This story of scarcity and not enoughness. And I was able to find that it began about 5,000 years ago.
Wow.
And at that time is when we went from being hunter-gatherers to agrarian. And then these messages started to build. And as communities started to form, we had hierarchies, and therefore the message of not enough was useful in ordering society, and not useful in a good way, but it became the way of things for humans. But what I found, though, was that this story is very short-lived in terms of the grand history of the world. And there were many societies before that lived an enough story. So it's really about us getting to the point as a collective of human beings to where we can wake up from this never enough story that was perpetrated 5,000 years ago. It's been passed along, all these generations, and we take it as a given that there's scarcity and that we're not enough and that there isn't enough. And that orders our behavior. It orders all the institutions and structures in society. They're all built to kind of support and go along with this story of scarcity. But you look at the much wider story in nature, in evolutionary biology, in systems theory, in anthropology, you look wider and what you see is a very different story. It's one about enough for everybody, and that it's sustainable.
Right. Well, I have my window open and I'm seeing these beautiful fluffy birds, they've kind of got their winter coat on, just eating the berries out of the trees. And, as I was reading your book, that's kind of what it reminded me of, is, that Bible verse of, being the bird of the field and there's abundance around you and it's there for you to take and you don't have to strive, to do it. And so that's what was reminding me of that. So because like you said, it's been around for 5,000 years. I know that the family that I grew up in, it was a very not enough story family that, you have to compete. Your worth is derived by, the job that you do or the title that you have or the accomplishments that you've made. And so that is kind of almost, you even mentioned in the book, the Darwinian thing of survival of the fittest.
Yes.
And so that's a really harsh way of doing things. And you mentioned that when that's what our world is like, then we automatically start feeling like, oh, I'm not enough.
Right. When we derive our enoughness from what we have or what we do, what we accomplish, we're actually missing out on the enoughness that we really are, that we've always been, that we always will be. And we've created this separation between who we really are and who we portray ourselves to be or strive to be, which is between ourselves and other people, because we're always in competition to get that upper leg or whatever that is to try to prove that we're enough. And it's really the long way to get around to feeling enough. Because if we're using things and accomplishment, it's just a lot of effort and a lot of time and attention goes into trying to prove that we're enough. When what I'm saying is, like what you said, the abundance is there, not just around us, but within us. And if we can get really in touch with our gifts, what makes us unique, what drives us, what passions we want to express, then that is where we really feel that sense of worthiness, that sense of groundedness that we've been searching for through things and accomplishments. And
Right.
and it lasts forever, because once you know that, who you are and that you are enough, you're no longer having to keep feeding that empty well all the time with a new accomplishment or a new possession or something
Right.
like that.
So kind of outside validation, because you can find it from within. And I like that I found a picture of Dorothy with her ruby slippers going on the yellow brick road, because that's what you're talking about is, we have it from within. Well, we're almost to our first break. And so tell us about, you have some really cool giveaways, some, what do you have? Downloads?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so how can people tap into the stuff that you have to give?
Oh, okay. Well, I noticed that you put it on your website, but also you could just go to my website, which is enoughness.org.
Okay.
And there you have there's videos, meditation videos. There's a free download of a mini guidebook that has activities that guide you through the enough process, and lots of other
Wonderful.
stuff.
Okay, so Enoughness, so enough, ERS, Enoughness, which I love,
Yeah.
.org. Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, we're going to take a really quick break, everybody, and so we'll be right back. This is Unstuck Joy. I'm your host, Vicki Todd, and we are talking about the new Enough story with our guest, Laurie McCammon. See you in a bit. Hey everybody, welcome back to Unstuck Joy. I'm your host, Vicki Todd, and we are talking about the Enough story with our guest, Laurie McCammon. And so Laurie was just telling us the difference between the Never Enough story, the old story that's been around for 5,000 years, and the new Enough story about abundance and love and community. And so you said that you had this divine download, but at that time in your life, you had been a stay-at-home mom, or were a stay-at-home mom for 14 years. And so what was that transition like for you to say, oh, I have these gifts that I really need to get out into the world? What was that like for you?
Yeah. Well, Jean Bolin calls it like your assignment. And
Yes.
it really was when the enough message came to me, I just couldn't let it go. It was like this open question in my life. Like I knew it felt like the truth to me. But I wanted proof. I needed proof or whatever. So I became like this detective, and I was just driven by getting answers. And for how could that be true? Could it be true that really there is enough? Really that we are each enough? And every time I would look into whether it was science or sociology or psychology or evolutionary biology or physics, whatever, it kept affirming that yes, there is enough, and it is about enough. So I guess that drove me for a while. But when it came to then doing something with what I was gathering, making it into a book, that was a huge transition for me personally, because it was like, well, who's going to publish a book from somebody who's been a stay-at-home mom, all this time? Right. And you hear all these horror stories about how hard it is to publish a book. And I didn't have a social media audience. I didn't have clients. I didn't have a professional presence. And so if I had followed the Never Enough story, it would have said, don't even try. The odds are like impossible. Don't even try. So that was my first, what I would call an enough initiation. And what I realized was if I can convince myself to at least take the next step, that and keep open the door that maybe I could be enough. Maybe this is enough to be published. Then just act as if it's going to happen. Right. And doing that led to the very first publisher that I approached, publishing the book. So
that's wonderful.
So and that never happens. So I don't take that as something about me. I really take it about the timeliness of the enough message and the universality of it, because I think we're all getting the enough message. We're waking up to it. We know that something's wrong with the current paradigm. We know it's not sustainable. We know it's harmful and it causes a great deal of suffering. So I think the enough message is coming along with that feeling of enough is enough with the old, the old paradigm. And that enough is enough is like 0.0. It's like 0 point to this launch pad to, building the world from this place of enoughness.
Right. I love that, because I'm right there with you. I truly believe that if something is meant to happen, it falls into place. It's like dominoes just falling down, Yeah. And so that's awesome. One thing I really liked about your book, and here you are, stay-at-home mom for 14 years, and you knew that you had these gifts. And, I'm sure that, you felt a little bit of guilt, like, oh, what about my family? Because it takes a lot of time and effort, to write a book, and especially one that's so researched like this. But I love how you said, if you're just drawing a little bucket at a time from your gifts, that's not going to be enough. You really need to just dive into that full pool. And I totally get that. I've gotten the download just recently. I always put my art last. Why? This is why I quit my professor to begin with. And so that's my goal for 2018 is to fill up little buckets when I have time, but to just dive into it. So can we go into the gather, repeat, share, and transform?
Absolutely. Sure.
Okay. And so describe to us what that process is, because you said it not only tells us where we are, but it can actually predict where we're going.
Absolutely. Well, years ago, I had the wonderful privilege of working with a man named August Shikachi, and he was a systems theorist, and he worked on a theory that built on George Land's theory, grow or die, which sought an overarching explanation of how nature grows, how everything in nature grows. And it turns out that it's a 4-stage process, no matter what you're talking about, whether you're talking about an individual human being, or you're talking about a whole ecosystem, or you're talking about a business. It doesn't matter what you are talking about. It's how it evolves. And so the 4 stages are gather, repeat, share, transform. And what's really cool about it is I think it's easier for your listeners to think of it in terms of the stages of life.
Yes.
Infancy, childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. So if I were to ask you, Vicki, what stage of this growth process, of this lifespan, whatever, do you think humanity as a whole is in right now? What would you say about that?
Oh, gosh, I feel, and I know this because you had the grid, with the gray, the gray area on the thing, but just with everything that's going on in the world and the news right now, some of us are still kind of in the repeat, which is very much my tribe, my political party, my community, my own little world there. We're in the share, where it's nation and, with the sharing of social media and all of that. But there is a part of the world that is moving into this transform that is looking to the global output of the world and how we can work as a global community, which is so beautiful. And so I know that we're all mostly in a chunk in the share, but we are moving. It's not something in the future. It is happening.
Absolutely. And if you kind of partner that up with what Margaret Mead said, that never doubt that a small committed group of citizens can change the world. It's the only people who ever have. you really start to think about this, the leading edge, those who are stepping into this transform are really the ones who are going to bring us into a different kind of future. If we're spending all our time watching TV, what we're really seeing is echoes of repeat and share, or the childhood and adolescence. And you think of, adolescent behavior, what that's like. There's a lot of clicks, and there's risk taking, and there's living for the moment. And it's not until you get into the adult phase where you really start to see the big picture, and you really start to have a different motivation for life, which is protection of life, which is, serving life. So as a parent, or as someone who's married and starting, to work in the community and serve the community. So that's what we are, I think, as a human race. It's inevitable that we reach adulthood. So this is where I get really optimistic about the future of humanity, because I know people are already living there. And in Paul Hawken's book, Blessed Unrest, he's documented millions of independently arising movements all over the globe that all have the same enough ethic in mind at the core.
Yeah, because it was so interesting. You said industries like technology, they're already looking into what, we're calling the 0-point field, that quantum physics of it's not just empty space, where we can't see. Because the never enough story is only relying on, I believe in what I see.
Right.
But with the quantum field, there's this, we can create stuff and pull stuff out of the ether. Right. And so we already have technology, and you mentioned some more that are already doing the new enough story. And I find that very encouraging. I also found it very encouraging that you mentioned somewhere that, when it gets all that, where it seems like we're kind of taking 10 steps back, that's really a good thing, because it means we need to get rid of that. And it kind of raises its head up again before it totally goes away. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely. I think we as human beings need the contrast, and it's a wake-up call. When things seem to be getting worse, I think that's when you really start to see the contrast. And, I before our call today, I picked my little card here, and it was vision. And I know that it's all about art visioning, and that's what you do so beautifully, Vicki. But it made me think about how most of our sort of sensing is about what's outside of us. We're always looking out at the society and what it expects of us and what's happening and what are the value systems. And I would like to turn the card inward. And because I think that's the future, is in turning our vision inward, because at our core essence, we want the same things. We serve the greater good, because we're heart connected when we're inside. This world is not very heart connected the way it's been. And so that's just something that I would encourage people to do, is to spend more time looking within for your cues and clues about where you want to go, what you want to do, how you want to spend your time.
Right. And learning to trust that inner voice. And, you said in the book that it's a moving from relying on the head and moving down to thinking with the heart. And in the greater society, at least in our society, that's not really valued, because people say, oh, you have to work really hard for something. Or if you can't, see something, then, oh, that must not be true. But that's what you mean by going within, is moving to your heart space.
Yeah, I think it's actually a more evolved consciousness that we have. And the heart, actually, the electromagnetic field, our brains and our hearts both have an electromagnetic field. And that is proof that there's an intelligence. That's how we measure that. And the heart has a field that's 5,000 times larger than that of the head. Yeah. So if we can be in our hearts, we get to sense. And in fact, I would love to talk about sometime how when you start to work with a group, you sense each other. There's this ability to sense the greater whole, directly once you get into the heart.
Well, let's take a quick break, and let's start there after the break. And so we are talking all things the New Enough story with our guest, Laurie McCammon. I'm your host, Vicki Todd. This is Unstuck Joy, and we'll be right back. everybody. Welcome back to Unstuck Joy. I'm your host, Vicki Todd, and we are talking with Laurie McCammon about the enough story. And so before we went to break, we were talking about the importance of gathering in circles. And so tell us about your circle process, because that's a huge part of your guidebook. Is you can do stuff as an individual, but gathering in circles. So why is that important?
Well, even though the enough work begins with I am enough, at one point, it has to expand into the we are enough. And, when you know that you're enough, only then are you really available to collaborate with others with a full heart and to be fully supportive of other people's gifts and passions and purpose. And that's, I think, how we're going to move from a hierarchical model of communication and work to a truly egalitarian collaborative model. Because we're not just doing the tools, we're also having the inner attitude and of knowing that we have value and that everybody in the room has value. And therefore, you don't have this inner talk going on about, well, gee, she's hogging the space, or she's doing more than I'm doing, or, whatever competition stories that we're telling ourselves when we're collaborating with others. So Circle is able to just get rid of all of that. And it's very simple. It's it's based on indigenous principles. And I love you. We were just talking in the break of your experience in Australia with the Maori people. How do you say Maori?
Maori. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Yeah,
well, that's right. The Maori people. And so Circle is a very indigenous to all human beings. It's how we really want to be. And so it's very simple. You sit in circle. You use a talking piece, which just slows down the conversation. And what it means is there's no crosstalk. The person with the talking piece speaks and everybody else deeply listens. And that process of deeply listening without commenting actually ends up feeling more supportive and bonds us more as a group than you could ever imagine. This magic takes place just from that very simple thing. And then there's almost always a centerpiece in the room to remind us of both our own center and that we as a group have a center, and it's a place to focus your attention as well. And it's usually a flame or flowers or maybe some sacred objects that we have, personal things that have meaning to us, that we can put in the center that symbolizes our togetherness. And so I've been involved in the Women's Circle movement for, probably like 20 years now. And have even brought some of that to the United Nations as a delegate to the Commission on the Status of Women. So I truly believe in it, and I believe it can bring about peace. It can really bring forth collective wisdom, and it taps our essence. And when we are able to speak with our voices in a safe place, Circle is a very safe place. And trust our voice and trust our inner knowings, we realize that we are connected at this deep level. And we're deeply connected in the things that we want, the things that we care about, the things that we envision for our children, grandchildren, and future generations. So it's just a beautiful process. And it's at the core of the Enough message because they go hand in hand.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so beautiful. And I remember last February in your workshop at the Women of Wisdom conference in Seattle, it wasn't a huge circle. I'd say we probably had 8 or 9 ladies in the circle, maybe 10. And people were very vulnerable. But at the same time, we didn't stay at that level of sadness. Everybody had the chance to evolve and then come out feeling empowered and victorious. And it was a very nurturing, very, because I hadn't met anybody in that room. But by the time, we're hugging and, by the end of the day, but it, like you said, the deep listening. I took some life coach training a couple of years ago, and the instructor called it brilliant listening. And so I think it's the same thing, because a lot of times we're not listening. We're thinking what we're going to say next.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're not really listening very deeply.
Right.
And we feel that when people are deeply listening to us, we feel that, and it feels really good.
Yeah.
You know, to know that they're not in their heads, they're in their hearts when they're listening.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
Oh, and that's one thing when we were talking about, if you just go back to your gifts and it's just one little bucket at a time, and that's not going to be enough, you use the analogy of the dam, and not just with using your gifts, but, changing your own personal community, or changing your workplace, or changing, the larger area of your city or beyond.
Mhm.
But if we kick out one board of that dam, then the momentum is going to kick down the rest. And then it's just this gush forward of moving into this enough story. And like you said, we don't go backwards. We have to move forwards with this, which is awesome.
Yeah, I think one of the ways we've been trapped into thinking that we're not enough is thinking we have to do it all. And so what we learn as we sit in circle and as we do this enough work and understand the enough message is that we realize that asking for help is not weakness. It's like you ask for what you need and you give what you can, and that is enough. And when you can accept that without feeling guilt or shame, but you're claiming yourself and your gifts and what you give to the group, then it all starts to work and flow together. And that's what we mean by take one, board from the dam, and someone else will take another board. And then the momentum of nature's way of supporting us in our enoughness starts to work with us, not against us.
Right. Right. And like we were talking about in an earlier segment, the gather, repeat, share, and transform. And you had done a diagram in the book of like concentric circles, of like throwing a rock in the pond and it goes out. So let's say that we're in a group, and you are moved ahead, the share, transform spot. Somebody in the group is still kind of in the repeat and almost getting to the share. And so how do you deal with that when not everybody's in the same mindset?
Right. Well, something interesting happens when you move into your enoughness or into the transform and share. All of a sudden, you don't need to control what other people are thinking or doing. You accept them as they are because you know and you believe that they are enough as they are in the moment. And you understand that we're each sovereign beings with our own path and our own stages of growth. And we can tap into our own journey and recognize in ourselves times when we have been stuck in the repeat or stuck, in an earlier phase of consciousness. And so we can be patient and we can let go of the need to make everyone else into the likeness of what we want. We can accept them for their enoughness, for their heart, and encourage them to step into their own strengths and their own power and just create a nurturing space for people to grow in ways they want to grow. Right. So that's what's helped me. And I think every time you move from one stage to the next, you can look back and really be aware of the whole journey. But if you can't look forward into it. So in other words, if you're an environmentalist and you're talking about, how much you care about climate change, if you're talking to somebody whose biggest thing is, oh, well, I need my job at the power plant to feed my family, if that's their focus, they can't go to that more global feeling. But you can. So then you act from your place, of action,
Right. And like we talked about before, that whole, quantum field thing of the 0 point field where there's energy in the invisible space. And, and I so believe in this because it happens all the time, that when we start moving in a certain direction and maybe we leave behind some people in our life, whether it's coworkers, family members, whoever, that aren't quite with us yet, new people who are at this new, share/transform level will show up, right?
Yes. Absolutely. I think that, one of the most profound things that I think happens with the enough process is that you start to really attract your tribe.
Yes.
You become into alignment and you become such a strong attractor for the things that support and help you express your enoughness. It
Yes.
naturally happens with people, with material support, and everything. I mean, this call here today, for example, that we have an alignment in our life missions, and we're able to be here and support one another in that, and support other people who are listening and gathering around, your show. So this is how the new world is being built. It's like this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very gentle way of doing it. And like we were saying before, going within and trusting that inner voice and trusting the things that are invisible to us that, I don't know if I believed it totally last February when I was in your workshop, but after all these months, I believe it now. If you can dream something, you will be given the resources and people and contacts to make it happen. And so that's what the Enough message is about, is that level of trust and grace.
Right.
Yes.
And it's okay to doubt yourself sometimes.
Yeah.
I think that, it's a process, because we've all been, pretty much brainwashed into thinking that there isn't enough and our dreams can't come true and all these things. And we have to be gentle and understand that when you're barraged by these messages from the outside every day after day, every now and then you're going to believe them. But over time, you're going to believe them less and less, and you're going to prove to yourself every time you act out of a feeling of enoughness, your life expands. And that's the thing. And you prove it to yourself as you go along, and you become more focused, and you attract what you need. And, all of that resistance you used to have to battle just disappears. So that's it, but it's a process. It's not like an overnight fix. But a lot of it, I think, is kind of subconscious. It's not something you even have to try to work at. Like every time you just notice that word enough, it sort of gives you another reminder, like, oh yeah.
It really does. Because even before the show today, 'cause I always get a little bit nervous, and I'm like, Vicki, you are enough. It is just so freaking calming, when you tell yourself that. So we need to take one last break, everybody. So this is Unstuck Joy. I'm your host, Vicki Todd. We're talking about the Enough story with Laurie McCammon, and we will come right back. And I want to ask Laurie about some specifics of how this is happening in the world with the enough stuff that's already going on. So we'll be right back.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Unstuck Joy. I'm your host, Vicki Todd, and we're talking with Laurie McCammon about the Enough story. And so, Laurie, toward the end of the book, you had some concrete examples of how the Enough story isn't just a pie in the sky thing that we're hoping for, but it's actually happening. So can you give us maybe one or two examples?
Sure. Well, it is. It's happening already, and it's something we can join and get into, and don't have to start from scratch. Well, one of the things that I really love is the growth of this thing called the sharing economy.
Yes.
And so there's communities all over, including here in Portland, Maine, where I live, where people join what's called an hour exchange. And basically what they do is an hour of my time is equal to an hour of your time. So it doesn't matter what I give, what I'm doing when I give. I could be sewing something for someone, and then I can have somebody else from the exchange come in and do some gardening for me. Right. So, and it's a way to share what we already have, and to understand that we have so much abundance that we're not really even sharing and tapping into. And that's beyond this the economy. There's so many things. There are communities that are taking charge of their energy future by installing community wind turbines and solar panels and things like that. CSA farms where people are coming together to support local farming. So, it's already happening, and it's this trend that is unavoidable, really. It's inevitable that we're going to move into more and more this feeling of sharing and enough.
Right. And this taking back sovereignty, right? Mm-hmm. Not just for yourself, but of your community. And to make that work, it goes back to the wisdom circle. To, share the ideas. And so it really is, throwing the rock in the pond and it growing and growing. Mm-hmm. let's see. Okay, because this is a big shift for a lot of people. Because some people, like we said, are still kind of in, the repeat, it's my community, my family, my tribe, my political party. And then we've got some people who are already into the transform of wanting to go global with stuff. So what are some of the biggest barriers, and how can people overcome it, at least on an individual level?
Well, my feeling that is the first biggest barrier to enough message is this thing we call the expert paradigm, like that we trust external experts to tell us how to think, what to do, what to value, or whatever. We are moving more into a sense of gaining our sense of the truth and discernment from our inner essence. So it's this shift from expert to essence. And when we do that, we really are accessing collective wisdom. And as groups start to do that and understand that when they come together with this, not I know the answer, but here's my piece of what I know well, and what's your piece, and to be open to what emerges. And you find that things, really the wisdom that's available at that essence level is so far advanced to, what one expert can give us.
Yeah.
So that's, definitely one way to break through that barrier that we have, this reliance on what's outside of us. And I love the work that you're doing, Vicki, because I think art and music and dance and movement and mindfulness, all these kinds of activities that aren't linear, that aren't about, analyzing, but that bring you beyond that into the right side of the brain, are really what's going to allow us to access our full contingent of intelligence that has not been welcome in the old paradigm.
Yeah. I'm all for going toward the right side of the brain. Speaking of that, okay, so what I did today, this is one of the exercises in Laurie's companion book of the Enough. And so it was to express your enoughness through art, and one of the exercises was through collage. And so I don't know if you can see it, but I went through some of my magazines with the purpose of finding not just any image, but something that spoke to me about my own enoughness. And when I started putting it together, it went in a story. And that's the creepy thing and good thing about collage, is it sneaks up on you because it has this kind of hidden thing going. So I found this image, and it looked like she's her own little egg, like she's kind of birthing herself into this enough story. And she goes on her journey, Dorothy with ruby slippers on the gold, what is it? The
yellow brick road.
Yellow brick road. I was going, is it golden? It's yellow brick road. I found this picture of this woman holding a cat, and she looks, kind of like, hey, don't mess with me. And I kind of equated that with the feminine energy that you talk about in the book, the nurturing and loving and surrendering and accepting. And that makes her strong, because we don't think of surrendering as strong, but that can make you very strong. And from there, she starts building her own set of wings. She taps into the wisdom of the elders. And, you told the story about the prophecy rock. And so I think that this is kind of something in that area. It may not be the prophecy rock, but, some of the Hopi Indian Native American carvings. And this is to symbolize my huge enoughness. And the rainbow is kind of like breaking that dam in the flow of going from the vulnerable person into I'm stepping into my full enough story. So,
wow.
Yeah. And so this is fun, everybody. Please try this on your own at home. So what tips? Because I know that a lot of people out there are really feeling frustrated right now with what's going on in the world. And so just very briefly, because I think we have 1 minute left, what are some tips that you can give people that are practical, realistic things that they can do to cope with what's going on and to help them move into their enoughness?
Minimize as much as possible how much news you watch, and how much time you spend with people who are negative, who are doubters, who are down in the dumps, and bring you down and don't believe in you. Find a circle or a community of people where you can be your true self And you can lend that kind of support to others to be their true selves. And lastly, follow your passion. Really trust and go within as much as possible. Trust what wants to come out and be expressed, because that's what the world needs. You are the enough the world has been waiting for.
Yes, and you're born with these gifts, and you have to trust it. You have to trust that you're supposed to use those. That's wonderful. Well, tell us one more time your website that people can go and just check out everything you do, but you have a meditation, you have a mini guidebook. How can they find all of that?
Yes. Enoughers.org. And then you can follow links to Facebook and Twitter. We're also on, and there's a blog as well.
Yes. Yeah. So let me show your book one more time. Okay. So please, everybody, go out and read it, because it's such a great, nurturing book. And I think, when I get back in that fear space and think, oh, no, I'm not enough, it's such a good reminder to say, you know what? I am enough. And it really makes you feel good. Well, thank you, Laurie. You're such a bright light in this world.
So are you.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you're here. And it's so great to see you again after, several months, seeing you at the Women of Wisdom conference. So
yes.
Thank you so much.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure.
Well, bye, everybody. Go do your own I Am Enough collage, because it really is a very valuable experience, and it maybe something bubbles up that you weren't expecting. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time on Unstuck Joy. Bye.
You've been listening to Unstuck Joy, the art of living on purpose with Vicki Todd. This hit show is where your higher purpose is revealed and cultivated. Now you too can share your unique light and special gifts with the world. Vicki's dedication to raising your life's purpose to something extraordinary is unending. So don't miss out on your opportunity. Catch Unstuck Joy with Vicki Todd and Dr. Pat Basile. For more information about Vicki and her work, go to VickiWorldArt.com. That's VICKI worldart.com.